She wasn't breathing right. That was the first thing Nathaniel Carter noticed when his horse nearly trampled her in the dark. He yanked the reins so hard, the animal reared up screaming into the frozen Montana night, and Nathaniel was out of the saddle before the hooves hit the ground. He dropped to his knees in the snow, him Nathaniel Carter, a man who had not kneeled for anything or anyone in 40 years, and he pressed 2 fingers against the side of her neck. Her pulse was there. Faint. Stuttering. Like a candle someone had nearly blown out. God Almighty, he breathed. She was curled on her side in the snow, her dark coat soaked through her hands wrapped in old strips of bandage that had turned gray from days of use. A leather medical bag lay half buried beside her, and it had fallen open, spilling small brown bottles and folded papers, and a pair of worn surgical scissors into the white drift around her. She had been walking. That much was clear. Her footprints stretched back into the darkness behind her, small and uneven. The stride of someone who had been pushing forward on will alone long after the body had stopped cooperating. And then she had simply stopped. Just stopped. Right here in the middle of the road, a half-mile from the nearest farmhouse and 2 miles from the town of Millhaven, with the wind coming down off the Rockies, hard enough to strip the bark off a pine tree. Nathaniel did not know her name yet. He did not know that the entire valley had been watching this woman work herself to death for 6 weeks. He did not know that 3 different families had offered her a warm bed, and she had refused each one because there was always another house that needed her more. He did not know that she had not eaten a full meal in 4 days, or that she had given her last bottle of fever medicine to a farmer's youngest child that very afternoon, and had nothing left in her bag that could help herself. He did not know any of that yet. All he knew was that she was a woman, she was alone, she was barely alive, and the storm coming down from the north was going to kill her within the hour if nobody did something. So Nathaniel Carter, who had not done something for another human being in longer than he cared to remember, did something. He gathered her up. She was lighter than he expected. That bothered him in a way he could not name. A grown woman ought to have more weight to her than this. She should not feel like carrying a bundle of winter-dried grass. But he pulled her against his chest, and she made a small sound. Not quite a word, not quite a cry. Something in between, and her head fell against his shoulder, and he stood up with her in the snow, and felt for the first time in a very long time that he was doing the right thing. "Easy," he said, even though she couldn't hear him. "Easy now, I got you." His horse, a big buckskin named General, stood patient in the road breath, clouding in the lamplight. Nathaniel managed to get himself mounted without letting her go, settling her across his lap, with her back against his arm, her feet hanging off to one side. He reached down and grabbed the medical bag, shoved it over the saddle horn, and turned General around. "Come on, boy," he said quietly. "We're going home." Before we go any further, if this story is already pulling at your heart, I want you to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on your notifications so you don't miss a single chapter. And when you get a chance, drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from. I genuinely want to know how far this story has traveled. I read every single one. Now let's go back to that cold Montana night and the moment one woman's sacrifice changed a man's entire world. Willow Creek Ranch sat at the top of a long rise overlooking the valley, and on a clear night you could see its lights from almost anywhere in the county. It was the kind of house that made people stop talking mid-sentence when they first saw it, not because it was beautiful exactly, though it was that, but because it was so much. So much wood, so much glass, so many rooms. Nathaniel's father had built it in 1849, when the territory was still wild and the cattle business was still young, and he had built it the way men of that era built things, with the intention that it would outlast everything that tried to bring it down. It had outlasted 2 hard winters. One range wore a drought that killed 1/3 of the county's cattle and both of Nathaniel's parents. What it had not outlasted was the warmth they had put into it. That had gone with them when they died 15 years apart, and since then the house had been a perfectly maintained, perfectly empty monument to a life Nathaniel had never quite managed to build. He employed 6 ranch hands, a cook named Bertram, who had been with the family since before Nathaniel was born, and a housekeeper named Margaret Ellis, who had worked at Willow Creek for 11 years and was in the opinion of most who knew her, the only reason the whole operation did not fall quietly to pieces. Margaret was awake when Nathaniel came through the front door. She was always awake when she should have been sleeping, and asleep at moments that confounded everyone around her. It was one of her more reliable qualities. She came out of the kitchen holding a lamp, took one look at what Nathaniel was carrying, and set the lamp down on the hall table without a word. She pulled back his coat, felt the woman's forehead, checked her pulse with 2 fingers, the same way Nathaniel had done in the snow, and then looked up at him with an expression that was equal parts alarm and something else he couldn't quite read. "How long was she out there?" Margaret asked. "Don't know. Long enough." He was already moving toward the stairs. "She needs warmth, and she needs it now. Which room?" "I'll get the blue guest room ready. It's the closest I can have it warm in 20 minutes if I—" "No." Margaret stopped. Nathaniel was already at the top of the stairs, and he was standing in front of a door that Margaret had not seen open in 20 years. The door at the end of the hall. The one with the brass handle that she dusted every week without ever turning it because she knew better than to ask. The master bedroom. "Nathaniel," Margaret said, carefully climbing the stairs behind him. "That room is the warmest room in this house. South-facing double fireplace, heaviest walls." He said it the way he said everything, flat, certain, like the decision had already been made, and the conversation was merely a formality. "She needs the warmest room, so that's where she's going." People will what, Margaret?" She pressed her lips together. "Talk." He looked down at the woman in his arms. Her breathing had evened out slightly since he'd gotten her out of the wind, but her color was still wrong, too pale, too gray at the edges. Her hands, even wrapped in those old bandages, were the hands of someone who had worked without stopping. The skin at her knuckles was cracked. There was a faint scar on her left palm that looked surgical. "She spent 6 weeks caring for everyone in this valley," Nathaniel said. "I can spend 1 night caring for her. Open the door, Margaret." Margaret opened the door. The room smelled of cedar and cold, and the particular stillness of a space that has been preserved rather than lived in. The furniture was good heavy walnut, the kind built to last, and the bed was made up with linens that Margaret had changed every few months out of a habit she'd never been able to explain to herself. The fireplace on the far wall was laid but unlit, and Margaret went straight to it with the lamp, while Nathaniel carried the woman to the bed. He set her down as gently as he could manage. She stirred when her head touched the pillow, her eyes moved under their lids, and her lips parted, and she said something so quiet he had to lean down to catch it. "The Morrison children," she murmured. "Someone needs to check on the Morrison children. The youngest one, he was running a fever this morning, and I didn't have enough." "The Morrison children are fine," Nathaniel said, even though he had no idea who the Morrison children were. He said it because she needed to hear it. "They're all fine. You don't have to worry." She didn't answer. She had slipped back under again. He straightened up and stood there looking at her for a moment. This stranger in his bed, in his room, in the house that had not held another person in so long, it had forgotten what that felt like. "I need warm water," he said. "And whatever Bertram has in the kitchen that might bring a fever down." "Nathaniel." Margaret's voice was gentle in a way that made him turn around. She was crouching in front of the fireplace, coaxing the kindling to catch, and she was watching him over her shoulder. "Do you know who she is?" He shook his head. "Her name is Clara Bennett." Margaret turned back to the fire. "She's a nurse. She came up from the south about 6 weeks ago when the sickness started moving through the farming settlements. She's been going house to house ever since. Alone. Alone." Nathaniel looked at the woman in the bed again. "In this weather, for 6 weeks. 6 weeks, Margaret confirmed. "People have been talking about her all month. The Hendersons said she sat up 3 nights running with their boy when he couldn't breathe right. The Kowalski family. You know them out on the eastern parcel near the creek. She walked 4 miles in a blizzard to reach them because her horse went lame." The fire caught, and Margaret stood up and brushed her hands on her apron. "There's not a family in this valley she hasn't helped, and from what I hear, she never took so much as a meal for payment." The room was beginning to warm. The fire threw orange light across the ceiling, across the walnut furniture, across the face of the woman in the bed. and something moved in Nathaniel Carter's chest that he had not felt in a very long time. Not pity. Pity was easy. He'd felt pity plenty of times. Pity was something you felt from a safe distance from behind a window from the top of a hill. This was something different. This was closer to shame. "What's her name again?" he asked. "Clara," Margaret said. "Clara Bennett." He nodded once like he was committing it to memory. "I'll sit with her tonight. You get some sleep." "Nathaniel." "Sleep, Margaret." She left him there. He did not sleep that night or the next one. Clara Bennett's fever climbed through Christmas Day and did not show signs of breaking. Nathaniel sent one of his hands into Millhaven for the town doctor, a man named Aldridge, who arrived on the afternoon of the 26th with his bag and his opinions, and examined Clara with the brisk efficiency of a man who had seen too much illness to be moved by any particular instance of it. "Exhaustion, exposure, and fever," Aldridge said, snapping his bag shut. "She's strong or she'd be dead already. Keep her warm, keep fluids in her, and pray she comes back on her own. There's not much else I can tell you." "That's it," Nathaniel said. Aldridge gave him a look over the top of his spectacles. "Mr. Carter, I've been practicing medicine for 30 years. Half the time keeping a patient warm and letting the body do what it knows how to do is the only medicine there is." He paused. "Who is she to you?" "She's a guest." "A guest." Aldridge said it the way people say words when they don't believe them. He glanced at the room, the good furniture, the warm fire, the care evident in every detail, and then back at Nathaniel. "Does she have family? Anyone who ought to be notified?" "I don't know yet." "Well, when she wakes up, if she wakes up, you might want to find out." Nathaniel walked him to the door and went straight back upstairs. He found the medical bag on the bedside table where Margaret had set it the night before. He had moved it twice, and both times found himself putting it back. He couldn't explain why exactly, except that it felt like it belonged close to her, like it was part of her, the way a man's hat or a woman's wedding ring was part of them. He sat in the chair beside the bed and looked at the bag. He did not touch it. For about 20 minutes. Then he opened it, not to pry. He told himself that clearly, even though there was no one in the room to hear it. He opened it because he wanted to understand what she carried. What the work looked like up close when you were the one doing it. The medical instruments were few and well used. A stethoscope, bandage rolls, a small surgical kit in a leather pouch, bottles of medicine, most of them nearly empty or entirely empty. A notebook, not her journal, just a working notebook with patient names and dates and symptoms, written in a neat, precise hand that got progressively less neat as the entries continued, as if the hand that wrote them had been steadily running out of strength. He read the entries. December 1st. Morrison family. Thomas, age 7, presenting with fever and chest congestion. Administered last of the eucalyptus oil. Will need to source more from town. Left 2 days' supply of willow bark. December 4th. Kowalski family. 4 children, sick parents showing early symptoms. Walked 4 miles in snowstorm. Horse lame. Left everything I had. May God forgive me if it isn't enough. December 9th. Henderson boy, James, age 4. Critical. Sat 3 nights. Fever broke this morning. He is going to live. He is going to live. He is going to live. She had written it 3 times. Not for emphasis, he could tell by the handwriting that it was involuntary, the pen moving ahead of conscious thought. The relief of a woman who had been holding her breath for 72 hours, finally being allowed to exhale. December 14th. Ran out of fever medicine entirely. Making do with what I can find. Nights are getting colder. December 19th. Hands are giving me trouble. Old injury. Doesn't matter. December 22nd. I think I may be getting sick myself. Doesn't matter. 4 more families to check on before I can rest. December 23rd. I should have rested yesterday. And then nothing. The last entry was on the 23rd, the day before she collapsed in the road. Nathaniel sat with the notebook in his lap for a long time. Outside, the storm that had been building for 2 days finally arrived in full force, rattling the windows and driving snow against the glass in waves. The fire crackled and settled. Somewhere downstairs, Bertram was moving around in the kitchen, making the small domestic sounds that big empty houses accumulate when the people inside them stop listening. Clara hadn't stopped. That was the thing he kept coming back to. She had known she was sick, had written it down, acknowledged it clearly, and had kept going anyway. Not from recklessness. Not from a lack of judgment. From a calculation that her own needs were simply less important than someone else's. He had never once made that calculation in his life. Not once. He set the notebook carefully back in the bag and looked at her. She was pale and still. Her dark hair spread out across the pillow. Her bandaged hands folded at her sides in the careful arrangement that Margaret had settled them into while changing her into dry clothes. She looked younger than he'd expected. Not young exactly. Somewhere in her late 20s or early 30s, but worn in a way that had nothing to do with age. Worn the way tools get worn. The way things get worn when they have been put to hard use by someone who loves what they're doing too much to stop. "Miss Bennet," he said quietly. She didn't stir. "I read your notebook." He paused. "I'm not sorry I did, though I expect you'll be angry about it when you wake up." He stopped again, turned the chair slightly so he was facing the fire, instead of her elbows on his knees. "I've been sitting in this house for 20 years telling myself I earned the right to be left alone, that I built something here, that I worked for it, that it belonged to me, and I didn't owe anybody anything." He was quiet for a moment. "Your notebook makes that argument feel pretty small." The fire popped. A log shifted. "December 9th, he said. "He is going to live 3 times. He shook his head. "I don't think I've ever wanted anything badly enough to write it 3 times. He sat with her through the night. On the second day, the gossip arrived before the weather cleared. Nathaniel had expected it, had in fact predicted it to himself, almost to the hour. But that didn't make it more pleasant when Judge William Foster rode up the hill at 10:30 in the morning, dismounted at the front door, with the stiff dignity of a man who believes his presence is inherently corrective, and asked to speak with Mr. Carter in private. Margaret showed him to the study. Nathaniel made him wait 7 minutes before coming downstairs, which was the precise amount of time he felt the situation warranted. "William," he said, settling into the chair behind his desk without offering the judge a seat. Foster took one anyway. "Nathaniel." The judge was a big man going to fat around the middle in the way of men who had once been physically powerful and had let comfort do its work on them. He had a white mustache and the kind of steady gaze that worked well in courtrooms and failed almost everywhere else. "I'll come to the point. There's talk in town." "There's always talk in town." "There's talk specifically about the woman you brought here 2 nights ago." Foster leaned forward. "An unmarried woman. In your house. In your—" He stopped. "Margaret tells me you gave her the master bedroom. Margaret tells you a great deal. Don't deflect. I'm trying to help you." "Are you?" Nathaniel's voice was level and entirely without heat. "Your reputation in this county matters. Your business relationships matter. People are saying—" "What are they saying, William?" Nathaniel asked. "Exactly. I want to hear the words." Foster shifted in his chair. "They're saying it isn't proper. A bachelor and an unmarried woman. A bachelor and an unconscious woman who nearly died in the road on Christmas Eve. Regardless of circumstances. She spent 6 weeks walking through a blizzard to treat sick families," Nathaniel said. "Alone, with no pay. She ran out of medicine and kept going. She ran out of food and kept going. She ran out of everything but the will to keep showing up for people who needed her. And then she ran out of that too, and she went down in the snow 1/2 mile from my property." He paused. "Where exactly in that sequence of events do you think I was supposed to put my reputation ahead of her life?" Foster was quiet. "She needed the warmest room in the house," Nathaniel continued. "So I gave her the warmest room in the house. She needed someone to sit with her through the fever. So I sat with her. If this county wants to find something objectionable in that, then this county has an interesting set of priorities." "Nathaniel, I appreciate you coming, William." Nathaniel stood, which ended the conversation regardless of whether the judge was ready for it to end. "I'll let you know when Miss Bennet is well enough for visitors." Foster left. Nathaniel stood at the study window and watched the man ride back down the hill and felt something he couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction exactly, but something like relief. As if a thing he'd been quietly ashamed of for a long time had just been named out loud and turned out to be smaller than he'd built it up to be. He went back upstairs. Clara's fever spiked on the afternoon of the second day and frightened him badly. She had been still more or less still since he'd brought her in the deep stillness of a body conserving whatever resources it had left. But around 3 o'clock on the 26th, something shifted. She began to move. Not with the healthy restlessness of someone coming back to consciousness, but with the urgent, purposeful movement of someone acting out a dream they believed was real. She tried to get up. Nathaniel caught her. "No," he said firmly, putting his hands on her shoulders. "No, Miss Bennet. You stay down." "I have to." Her eyes were open but not seeing him. She was looking at something beyond him, something that existed in whatever fever landscape her mind was moving through. "The Morrison children. Someone has to check the roads are icy, and if Thomas's fever came back without anyone, Thomas Morrison is fine." He held her gently, but with enough weight to keep her from rising. "I sent one of my hands to check on him this morning. The boy is fine. His mother says he ate breakfast and asked for seconds." Something flickered across her face. It might have been relief, but it was the confused, uncertain kind, the kind that doesn't quite trust itself. "You don't know Thomas Morrison," she said. "No, but I know you're worried about him, so I found out." She went still. Her eyes moved to his face, really looked at him. This time, really tried to see him. "Who are you?" "Nathaniel Carter. This is my house. You collapsed on my road 2 nights ago." He loosened his grip slightly when he felt her stop straining against him. "You've got a fever, and you've been pushing yourself for 6 weeks, and your body has finally decided enough is enough. Now I need you to lie back down." "I can't. You can't do much of anything right now," he said, not unkindly. "That's the honest truth of it. The valley is still standing. The people you helped are still standing. You don't have to fight tonight." She looked at him for a long moment. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes were bright with fever, and he could see the argument forming the reflexive insistence that there was more to do, that she couldn't afford to stop, that someone somewhere needed her. And then, like watching a building that has been standing on nothing, finally acknowledged the ground, something in her gave way. She lay back. "Okay," she said very quietly. "Okay." It was the smallest word, and it cost her everything she had. Nathaniel pulled the blanket back up around her and stayed where he was in the chair beside the bed and didn't look away. "The Kowalski family," she said, still with her eyes closed. Her voice was distant, moving in and out like something being carried by wind. "The youngest Marta, she was the last one showing symptoms when I left. I couldn't stay because the Hendersons. The Kowalski family is fine." He didn't know that. He was going to find out first thing in the morning. "You keep saying that. Because you keep worrying." "What if I'm right to worry? Then I'll send someone to fix whatever needs fixing," he said. "But right now tonight, you let that be someone else's job." A long pause. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "I know," he said. "I can tell." She slept. He sat in the chair beside the bed and listened to the storm outside and the fire inside, and sometime around midnight, he got up quietly and went to the window and looked down at the valley below. The dark land, the scattered lights of distant farmhouses, the same view he had looked at for 20 years, with a detachment so complete he had stopped seeing it as something that contained people. He saw it differently now. Down there in those lights were the families she had walked to in the snow. The children she had sat up with through the night. The people who had asked for help and gotten it not because she owed them anything, not because there was anything to gain from it, but because she had decided that was the shape her life was going to take. He pressed one hand against the cold glass and looked out at the valley for a long time. "All right," he said very quietly to no one in particular. "All right, I hear you." On the morning of the third day, Margaret came to find him in the chair beside the bed and didn't say anything for a long moment. "You haven't slept," she said finally. "I slept some." "You slept in that chair for maybe 2 hours last night. I came up to check on her at 3, and you were still awake. Margaret, I'm not scolding you. She came into the room and stood at the end of the bed, looking at Clara with the expression she used when she was doing an assessment. Not of the person exactly, but of the situation. Her color is better this morning. He looked up. It is. Margaret moved to Clara's side and put the back of her hand against her forehead. Fever's still there, but it's lower. I think she may be coming through it. She dropped her hand and turned to look at him. How long has it been since you ate anything? I'm fine. That wasn't the question. Margaret, I'll bring something up, she said, which was not quite a capitulation, but was as close as Margaret Ellis generally got to one. She started toward the door and then stopped with her hand on the frame and looked back at him. Not at Clara. At him. The way she used to look at him when he was young, and she was trying to figure out whether he understood something she didn't quite know how to say. Your mother would have done exactly this, she said. Exactly this. Open the best room in the house, sit up all night, send someone to check on the neighbors. She paused. I'd forgotten what it looked like. I'm glad I got to see it again. She left before he could answer. He sat with that for a while. Then he turned back to the woman in the bed. This stranger who had walked into his county and his road and his life without asking permission, and felt for the first time in a very long time that the room was not empty, that the house was not empty, that he in some way he was only beginning to understand was not empty. He sat back in the chair. Outside the storm had moved on in the night, and the sky beyond the window was the deep, still blue of a Montana winter morning after snow. The valley below Willow Creek Ranch lay white and quiet and still, and the light was just beginning to catch the tops of the hills to the east, turning them gold. It was Christmas morning, technically. A day late, but Christmas. For the first time in 20 years, Nathaniel Carter was not alone in his house on Christmas morning. He didn't know what came next. He didn't know who Clara Bennett was beyond what her notebook had told him, didn't know where she had come from, or whether she had people somewhere who were wondering where she was. He didn't know whether she would be grateful when she woke up, or angry about the room, or furious that he'd read her notebook. He didn't know anything about her, except that she had spent 6 weeks giving everything she had to people she didn't know, and that when her body had finally quit on her, she had fallen within reach of the one man in this county who had the space to catch her. He reckoned that was a thing worth paying attention to. "Merry Christmas, Miss Bennett," he said quietly. She did not answer, but she was breathing steadily now, her chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of genuine rest, and the fire was warm and the storm was gone, and outside the window, the whole valley was shining under a new day's light like something that had been washed clean. And Nathaniel Carter, who had not felt needed in 20 years, sat in that chair and was in some new and unsteady and completely unfamiliar way exactly where he was supposed to be. Clara woke up fighting. Not gently, not slowly. Not the way people wake up in paintings or poems with soft sighs and gradual awareness. She woke up the way someone wakes up when their body has been at war and the battle isn't over yet in their mind. Her eyes opened, and she was already trying to sit up, already reaching for something that wasn't there. Her hands grasping at the blanket like it was a medical bag she needed to open immediately. Easy. Nathaniel was out of the chair before she'd gotten halfway upright, one hand on her shoulder, firm but not rough. "Easy, Miss Bennett. You're safe." She stopped. She looked at him. Really looked at him this time, not the fever-hazed, half-conscious glance of the night before, but a clear, sharp, fully awake look that told him the mind behind it was considerably more formidable than her current physical condition suggested. "You're the rancher," she said. "That's right. Nathaniel Carter. You remembered." "I remember everything." She said it like a correction, like she wanted to establish that point clearly before anything else happened. Her eyes moved around the room, the fireplace, the furniture, the window, and he watched her take it in and process it with the same brisk efficiency he imagined she applied to everything. "How long have I been here?" 3 days. Something shifted in her face. Not alarm exactly. Something closer to calculation, the rapid internal accounting of a person who tracks time the way merchants track inventory. 3 days, she repeated. Yes, ma'am. The Morrison children are fine. Thomas ate breakfast the morning after Christmas and has reportedly been causing trouble for his mother ever since, which Dr. Aldridge tells me is an excellent sign. She stared at him. You checked. I sent Riley one of my hands out to all 6 families you had on your list. Everyone is recovering. The Kowalski girl Marta, she had a rough night on the 26th, but her fever broke by morning. He paused. You can stop worrying. You've earned that. Clara was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that wasn't empty, the kind that was full of thoughts moving too fast to catch. You read my notebook, she said. It wasn't a question. I did. That was private. It was, he agreed. I'm not going to pretend otherwise or make excuses for it. I read it because I wanted to understand who you were, and I won't apologize for wanting to understand that. I will apologize for not asking first if you want that apology. She looked at him for a long moment. He got the sense she was deciding something, weighing him against some internal standard he didn't know the terms of. What did you think? She asked finally. I hadn't expected that question. He took a moment with it. I thought you were the bravest person I'd ever read about, he said. And I thought you were going to kill yourself before Christmas if somebody didn't do something. Something moved across her face. Surprise maybe, or the effort of suppressing surprise. She looked away from him toward the window, and he let her have that. I wasn't being brave, she said. I was just doing what needed doing. That's what brave people always say. She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. How long before I can leave? Leave. He said the word back to her like he was testing its weight. I have rounds to finish. There are families I haven't checked back in on, and once the road's clear, I need to get back to Miss Bennett. He said it gently but clearly enough to stop her. You couldn't walk to the door right now without help. You know that. She pressed her lips together. He could see her testing the truth of that against what she wanted to be true, and finding reluctantly from the expression on her face that he was right. A few more days, he said. That's all I'm asking. Let your body catch up to your intentions. Another pause. Longer this time. I don't have money to pay for the room, she said. He blinked. Of everything she might have said that had not been in his list of expectations. I beg your pardon. The room. I assume you have rates. I don't have much cash on hand, but I could arrange. Miss Bennett, he said, and he could hear something in his own voice that surprised him. Something between amusement and a kind of aching respect. This is not a hotel. I know what it is. It's your home, which is why I'm trying to establish what I owe you for the use of it. You don't owe me anything. I owe everyone something. That's how the world works. He looked at her for a long moment. Who told you that? She opened her mouth, closed it. The question had landed somewhere unexpected. He could tell had found a gap in the armor she wore so naturally she'd probably stopped noticing she was wearing it. It's just true, she said finally. It isn't, he said. But we can argue about it later when you've eaten something. Are you hungry? A pause. Yes. Good. That's the first honest thing you've admitted since you woke up. Chai. Margaret brought up a tray with soup and bread and a pot of strong tea, and she set it on the table beside the bed, and looked at Clara with the frank assessing warmth of a woman who has spent a lifetime taking stock of people and mostly liking what she sees. You gave us a scare, Margaret said. I want you to know that. I don't say it to make you feel guilty. I say it because it's worth knowing that people were scared. Sometimes we forget that our lives matter to other people. Clara looked at her with an expression that was hard to read. Thank you for whatever you've done. The clothes, the room. I assume that was you. Some of it. Margaret glanced at Nathaniel, who was standing near the window with his arms folded. Some of it was him. Clara followed her gaze. Nathaniel didn't move. Eat, he said. Then sleep. We'll figure out the rest later. Margaret left. Clara ate. And Nathaniel stayed by the window and did not say anything else because he had learned in the past 3 days that Clara Bennett was a woman who needed space more than she needed words, and giving people what they actually needed, rather than what was easiest to give was a skill he was apparently only now beginning to develop. She ate half the soup and most of the bread. Then she set the spoon down and looked at him. "You're staring," she said. "I'm watching. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Staring is rude. Watching is—" He paused. "I've been watching over you for 3 days. I reckon I'm allowed another 10 minutes. She was quiet. Then, "Why did you bring me here?" "Because the storm was getting worse and the town was 2 miles away." That's the practical answer. It's the true answer. "It's one true answer," she said. "I want the other one." He turned away from the window and looked at her directly. She was pale and tired, and her hair was still a mess from 3 days in bed, and she was sitting up in his best room with a soup bowl in her lap, asking him questions like a woman who was accustomed to finding the real thing beneath the surface of everything. He respected that enormously. "I found you in the road," he said, "and I picked you up, and when I was carrying you to the house I passed the guest room, and it didn't feel like enough." That's the other true answer. You'd spent 6 weeks giving people the best you had. The guest room wasn't the best I had. He paused. "So I gave you this one." Clara looked at him for a long time. "That's the most honest thing anyone has said to me in months," she said. "I'll try to keep that up." The news that Clara Bennett was recovering at Willow Creek Ranch spread through Millhaven, the way all news spread through small towns, instantly, imperfectly, and with significant editorial embellishment by the time it reached anyone who actually cared about accuracy. By the afternoon of the 28th, 3 women from the Ladies' Aid Society arrived at the front door of the ranch with covered dishes and transparent pretexts. Margaret handled them with the diplomatic efficiency of someone who has spent years managing the gap between what people say they want and what they're actually after. "They want to see her," Margaret reported to Nathaniel in the kitchen afterward. "She's not ready for visitors. I told them that. They left the food anyway." She set 3 covered dishes on the kitchen table. "They also left opinions, but I didn't accept those." Nathaniel almost smiled. "What kind of opinions?" "The kind that come with concerned faces and questions about sleeping arrangements." Margaret sat down across from him. Mrs. Foster was among them. He looked up. "The judge's wife," she confirmed. She was very careful with her words, very precise. The way people are precise when they want to say something they know they shouldn't say directly. What did she want to know? She wanted to know if Miss Bennett was going to be staying permanently. Margaret folded her hands on the table. "I told her that was a question for Miss Bennett herself, and that when Miss Bennett was well enough to receive social calls, Mrs. Foster was welcome to ask her." "How did she take that?" "About as well as you'd expect." Nathaniel leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. He had known this was coming. He had known it from the moment he carried Clara through the front door. The mathematics of small-town scrutiny were not complicated, and he had done the calculation almost immediately and decided with a clarity that surprised him that he did not care. What surprised him now was that the not caring felt like a choice he'd made rather than a convenience he'd stumbled into. He had spent his entire adult life managing his reputation. The way you manage a piece of property, with careful attention, controlled access, regular maintenance. The idea of simply setting that down, of deciding it mattered less than what was right, was new enough to be slightly disorienting. But not wrong. "Let them talk," he said. "I intend to," Margaret said. "I just wanted you to know the volume had increased." What nobody in Millhaven knew, what Nathaniel himself didn't know until the following morning, was that Clara Bennett had not arrived in their valley by chance. He found this out because Clara told him. She was stronger on the 29th. Still not strong enough to do much about it, but strong enough to sit up in bed and hold a conversation without fading in and out. And that morning, after Margaret brought her breakfast, Nathaniel came in with coffee and sat in his chair, and Clara looked at him with the expression of someone who had been thinking while they rested and had arrived at a decision. "I should tell you something," she said. "All right. I didn't come to this county because of the epidemic." He waited. "I came because of the epidemic," she amended. "But not only because of it. I came because I needed to be somewhere that wasn't where I was." She looked down at her hands, the bandaged hands, the scarred palms. "I was in St. Louis. I had a position at the city hospital. A good one. I had a life that looked like what a life is supposed to look like from the outside. But there was a man. She said it plainly without the hesitation most people used when they got to this part of a story. A doctor at the hospital. We had an understanding. Or I thought we did. She paused. He married someone else, a senator's daughter, in October. The room was quiet. He told me the week before the wedding, she continued. He told me it was practical, that his career required certain connections, that what we had was, he used the word untenable, as if I were a problem that had been evaluated and found unsolvable. She said it without apparent bitterness, which somehow made it worse. I handed in my notice the next day. I heard about the epidemic up here through a colleague. I packed what I could carry, and I came north. You ran, Nathaniel said. She looked at him sharply. I'm not saying it critically, he said quickly. I ran once too. I ran right into this house and shut the door and called it building something. I know what running looks like. He paused. I just mean you didn't only come for the work. After a long moment she said, No, I didn't only come for the work. Did the work help? The question surprised her. He could see that. She sat with it for a moment, and he watched her actually consider it, not deflect it or minimize it, but genuinely think it through. Yes, she said finally. It helped. It's when I'm working, when someone needs me. I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm just the work. And the work is real, and the need is real, and whatever I'm carrying. She stopped. It gets smaller. Until you fall down in the road, Nathaniel said. She almost smiled. Until I fall down in the road. He was quiet for a moment. Then, what was his name? She looked at him. Why? I don't know. I asked without thinking. She shook her head. It doesn't matter what his name was. You're right, he said. It doesn't. She looked at him with the careful attention she gave to everything, and he felt under that gaze the particular discomfort of being seen accurately by someone you've only just met. What did you run from? She asked. Howe was quiet long enough that she might have thought he wasn't going to answer. But he was answering, he was just finding the honest version rather than the easy one. Nothing, he said. That's the trouble. I didn't run from anything, I just stayed. Stayed in this house and stayed in this life, and kept everything at a safe distance, and every year it got a little quieter, and I told myself that was peace. He looked at his hands, which were big and rough, and had never held a medical instrument in their lives, but had apparently been capable of keeping vigil for 3 days without being asked. It wasn't peace. I just confused comfort for meaning. Clara was looking at him with an expression he couldn't fully read. Something between recognition and something more complicated. We're quite a pair, she said. I expect we are. It was on the afternoon of the 30th that everything shifted. Not in a gradual way. Not in the slow, tidal way that most important things shift. It shifted the way ice shifts in a river one moment, solid one moment, breaking the pieces going everywhere at once. It started with a knock at the front door. Nathaniel was downstairs in the study when Margaret came to get him, and the look on her face told him before she said anything that this was not another covered dish from the Ladies' Aid Society. There's a man downstairs, Margaret said. He says his name is Dr. Gerald Harmon. He says he's from St. Louis. Nathaniel looked up from his desk. He says he's looking for Clara Bennett. The study went very quiet. Where is he? Front hall. I didn't let him pass the door. Margaret's expression was careful and precise and told him exactly what she thought of Dr. Gerald Harmon without using a single word on the subject. He seems... She paused. He seems like the kind of man who's accustomed to being let past the door. Nathaniel set down his pen, stood up, buttoned the top button of his shirt, which was a thing he did when he was preparing himself for something, and went to the front hall. The man standing there was roughly Nathaniel's age, dark-haired and well-dressed, with the sort of look that was either handsome or impressive, depending on whether you were inclined to be impressed by it. He had a good coat. He had good boots. He held his hat in both hands, and he looked at Nathaniel with the particular confidence of a man who has rarely been in rooms where he wasn't the most significant person present. Mr. Carter, he said. I'm Gerald Harmon. I'm a physician at City Hospital in St. Louis. I'm looking for a woman named Clara Bennett. I was told she was here. You were told correctly, Nathaniel said. I need to see her. She's recovering from a fever, and she's not receiving visitors. Harmon's jaw tightened slightly, the kind of tightening that in a less disciplined face would have been a grimace. I'm a physician. I can assess her condition myself. Dr. Aldridge has already assessed her condition, Nathaniel said. We're managing. I don't think you understand. Clara and I have... He stopped, recalibrated. We have matters to discuss. Important matters. I've traveled 4 days to get here. Then you've had a long trip. I'm sorry it was wasted. A pause. I beg your pardon. She's not well enough for this conversation, Nathaniel said. The flatness in his voice was not anger. It was something cleaner than anger, something more like absolute certainty. Whatever you've come to say, it can wait until she's better. That is not your decision to make. She's in my house, Nathaniel said. So yes, right now it is. Harmon stared at him. He was not accustomed to this. Nathaniel could see that clearly. He was not accustomed to doors that didn't open for him to men who didn't move when he needed them to move, to the particular immovability of someone who had already done the calculation and decided that no, the answer was still no, regardless of how the question was rephrased. I need 5 minutes, Harmon said. His voice had changed. Less assured now, something else underneath it. That's all. 5 minutes. Come back when she's well enough to decide if she wants to give them to you, Nathaniel said. Good afternoon, Dr. Harmon. He closed the door. He stood in the hall for a moment, after his hand still on the latch, listening to the sound of footsteps on the porch, then silence. Margaret appeared from the kitchen doorway. He's gone. For now. She looked at him with that expression again, the one from Christmas morning, the one she'd worn when she said his parents would have been proud. Are you going to tell her? He thought about it. Yes, he said. But not tonight. She'll want to know immediately. She needs another night of rest more than she needs to deal with that man's conscience. He moved toward the stairs. Tomorrow, first thing. Margaret nodded slowly. She's going to ask you what he said. I know, and what he wanted. I know that too. He paused on the third step. I'll tell her the truth. That he came. That I sent him away. That it was her choice whether to see him, and I was holding that choice for her until she was strong enough to make it. Margaret was quiet for a moment. That's a very decent thing to do, she said. That's a genuinely decent thing. He went upstairs. He told her the next morning, the 31st, with the new year not yet 12 hours away, and the ranch quiet around them, and Clara sitting up in bed, looking more like herself than she had since he'd found her. Some color back in her face, the watchfulness back in her eyes, the sense of a mind fully engaged with the world it was in, rather than the one her fever had built for it. He told her plainly, the way she seemed to prefer Gerald Harmon had come to the ranch yesterday afternoon. He had said he was from St. Louis. He had said they had matters to discuss. He had been sent away and told to return when she was well. He watched her face while he talked. She went very still. Not the stillness of someone surprised, the stillness of someone who has just received news. They were afraid they might receive, and had been bracing for it without admitting that they were bracing. He came here, she said. Yes. He followed me here. He traveled 4 days. He seemed... Nathaniel chose the next word carefully. Determined. Clara looked at her hands. Her jaw was set in a way he was beginning to recognize the look of someone thinking hard and not being gentle about it. What did he say exactly, his exact words? He said you had matters to discuss, important matters. He said he needed 5 minutes. And you said, I said come back when you were well enough to decide whether you wanted to give them to him. She looked up at him. You said that, it's your 5 minutes to give or not give Miss Bennett, not mine. Something moved across her face. It wasn't quite gratitude. It was something more complex than gratitude. Something that had to do with being treated as someone whose choices belonged to themselves. He got the sense it was not something she had experienced frequently enough to be entirely comfortable with it. "He wants me to come back," she said. It wasn't a question. "That's what the important matters are." "I would guess so." "He got married in October." "So you told me." "To a senator's daughter." "Yes." "And now he's traveled 4 days across a Montana winter to knock on a stranger's door looking for me." She laughed, a short, sharp sound that had no amusement in it. "He's discovered that the senator's daughter is less convenient than anticipated, I expect. Or less warm. Or both." She pressed her lips together. Gerald always prioritized convenience. Nathaniel said nothing. She didn't need him to say anything. She was talking through it the way you talk through something when you need to hear the logic out loud to know if it holds. "I'm not going back," she said. "Okay, I mean it. Whatever he's come to say, I'm not going back to St. Louis, and I'm not going back to him. That life—" She stopped. "That life was very tidy and very reasonable, and it made me miserable in ways I didn't have good words for until I got away from it and found out what it felt like not to be miserable." "What did that feel like?" She looked at him, surprised again. He seemed to keep asking her questions she hadn't anticipated, and she seemed to keep being more bothered by that than she expected to be. "Useful," she said. "It felt useful. Like I was like the thing I was doing mattered more than how I was being perceived while I did it." She paused. "Does that make sense?" "It makes more sense than you know," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then, "Will you tell him when he comes back?" "Tell him what?" "That I'm not going back, that there's nothing to discuss, that he can take his important matters and go home." She said it calmly, but with a finality that left no room inside it. "I don't want to see him. I don't want to give him his 5 minutes. You were right, it's my choice, and my choice is no." Nathaniel looked at her. "I'll tell him." "You don't have to." "I'll tell him," he said again. "It's all right. I don't mind being the one who tells a man no, when no is the right answer." Clara looked at him for a long moment with that direct, accurate gaze that seemed to look through things rather than at them. "Why are you doing all of this?" she asked. Not for the first time she had asked it in different forms since she woke up, but this time it was quieter, more genuine, more like a question she actually needed answered rather than one she was asking out of courtesy or suspicion. "You don't know me. 2 weeks ago, you didn't even know my name." I thought about how to answer that. He thought about the valley at midnight and the notebook, and he is going to live written 3 times in a hand that was running out of strength. He thought about 20 years of a house that felt like a very expensive waiting room, and the way it had felt to pick her up out of the snow and know with a certainty that had nothing to do with reason that he was finally doing something that mattered. "I knew your name," he said. "I'd just never cared enough to listen when I heard it." He paused. "I'm listening now." The room was very quiet. Outside, somewhere down in the valley, a church bell was ringing, counting something the hour or the end of a year. The sound carried on cold air a long way from where it began. Clara's eyes were bright, not with fever this time. She looked away from him toward the window, and he could see her trying to decide something, weighing something, doing the particular internal arithmetic of a person, deciding how much to let herself feel the thing she was already feeling. He didn't push her. He waited. "I don't know how to do this," she said quietly. "Any of this. I know how to work. I know how to be useful. I know how to take care of other people." She paused. "I don't know how to—" She gestured a small motion that took in the room, the warmth him. "This." "Neither do I," Nathaniel said. She looked at him. "I'm 40 years old, and I've been alone in this house for most of my adult life," he said. "I don't know how to do this either. I just know that not doing it anymore sounds a great deal worse than learning." The church bell rang its last count and stopped, and the silence after it was the particular silence of a moment that has just crossed some threshold it cannot uncross. Clara Bennett looked at Nathaniel Carter in the good light of a last day of the year morning, and whatever she was deciding, she decided it. "All right," she said. Not to his question, he hadn't asked one. Just to the general fact of where they were and what it meant. "All right." The same 2 words she'd said when he told her she could stop fighting. But this time they meant something different. This time they meant I'll try. This time they meant maybe. This time they meant I'm still here, and so are you, and that might be enough to start with. And Nathaniel, who had not hoped for much in a very long time, allowed himself to hope for that. Gerald Harmon came back on New Year's Day. Nathaniel had expected it. The man had traveled 4 days across frozen Montana to find Clara Bennett. He was not the kind of man who accepted a single no and rode home. Nathaniel had read that in him the moment he saw him standing in the front hall with his expensive coat and his careful hands. The kind of hands that had never done anything rough or urgent. The kind of hands that had always had the luxury of being precise. He came at 10 in the morning, which was deliberate. Not so early as to seem desperate. Not so late as to seem indifferent. Calculated. Everything about Gerald Harmon Nathaniel was already understanding was calculated. Nathaniel opened this door before he had a chance to knock a second time. Dr. Harmon. Mr. Carter. Harmon's eyes moved past him into the house, then came back. I'd like to see her. I spoke with Miss Bennett this morning, Nathaniel said. She asked me to tell you that she has nothing to discuss. She wishes you a safe journey home. A pause. Something moved through Harmon's face, not quite surprise, not quite hurt. Something that was trying to look like both without committing to either. She said that. Those were her words. I don't believe you. Nathaniel looked at him steadily. That's your right. But it doesn't change what she said. She's not well. She's been through an ordeal. She's not thinking clearly. Harmon's voice had taken on the particular tone of a man who has decided to be patient with someone he considers unreasonable. The measured professional calm of a person who manages difficult situations for a living. If I could just speak with her directly, she would tell you exactly what I just told you, Nathaniel said. With less patience, I expect, because she has considerably less tolerance for people wasting her time than I do. Harmon's composure slipped just slightly, just for a moment, like a seam giving way under pressure. You don't know her. I know her well enough. You've known her 4 days. I've known her 4 days, Nathaniel agreed. But I've read her notebook. I've sat with her through the fever. I've watched her wake up still worrying about other people's children before she even asked where she was. He paused. I know her well enough to know she means what she says. Harmon stared at him. The patience was gone now. Underneath it was something rawer, something that looked to Nathaniel's eye less like love, and more like a man confronting the consequence of a calculation that hadn't accounted for this particular variable. What has she told you about me? Harmon asked. Enough. Then you know that what we had was that it was significant, that it wasn't nothing. I know she left St. Louis the week after your wedding, Nathaniel said. I know she came north alone in the middle of winter with a medical bag and a notebook, and no plan except to make herself useful somewhere. I know that when I found her in the road, she was half dead, and she was still thinking about everyone else's welfare before her own. He looked at Harmon directly. I think you understand what that tells me about how she felt about what happened between you. The silence stretched. She deserved better, Harmon said finally. And to his credit, to whatever small credit Nathaniel was willing to extend him. It sounded true. It sounded like a man saying a thing he actually believed, which made it both more and less forgivable. I know that. I knew it when I did it. But the situation, Nathaniel said, is that you made a choice. She made a choice after yours. That's where the story is right now. He stepped back slightly, not an invitation, but a punctuation mark. She's not in a place where she wants to revisit the chapter you're in. I'd ask you to respect that. Another long pause. And what are you to her? Harmon asked. The question was sharp, sharper than anything else he'd said, and more honest. What exactly is your role in all of this, Mr. Carter? Nathaniel thought about it. It was a fair question. It deserved a fair answer. Right now, he said. I'm the person who picked her up when she fell. What that becomes later is between her and me. He looked at Harmon. But I'll tell you this, whatever it becomes, I intend to earn it. Not assume it, not calculate it. Earn it. He paused. She deserves someone who does the work. Harmon put his hat on. He didn't say anything else. He walked to his horse mounted and rode down the hill without looking back, And Nathaniel watched him go, and felt nothing in particular, not triumph, not relief. Just the quiet certainty that the right door had been closed. He went back inside. Clara was at the top of the stairs. She had gotten out of bed, had clearly heard the voices, and gotten herself to the hallway, and sat down on the top step to listen, which told him she was considerably stronger than she'd been letting on. She was in the wool dress Margaret had found for her dark hair loose, her bandaged hands folded in her lap. She looked at him. "I heard," she said. "I know. How long have you been sitting there?" "Since he said he didn't believe you." She paused. "You didn't have to say all of that." "I know." "The part about earning it." Her voice was careful. "You didn't have to say that." "No," he agreed. "But I meant it, so it seemed worth saying." He came to the bottom of the stairs and looked up at her. "You should be in bed. I should be a lot of things." But she didn't argue further. She put her hand on the railing and started to get up, and he came up 3 steps and offered his arm, and she took it without comment, and they went back down the hall to the master bedroom together in silence. At the door she stopped. "He's not going to let it go," she said. "Gerald doesn't let things go when he thinks he can still change the outcome. Then he'll have to get used to a closed door." She looked at him. "You'd keep doing that every time he comes back." "Every time," Nathaniel said. "Unless you want to see him, then I'll step aside. But until you tell me you want that." He shook his head. "That door stays closed." Clara looked at him for a long moment. Then she went inside and lay down and pulled the blanket up and stared at the ceiling. "He told me once," she said, "that I was too good at taking care of other people, and not good enough at taking care of myself. He said it like it was a flaw, like it was something I should work on." She paused. "I've been thinking about that for months, whether he was right." "I wasn't entirely wrong," Nathaniel said. He was in the doorway. He hadn't come in, had understood instinctively that she needed the room to herself right now, and him at the edge of it. But his conclusion was wrong. The answer to giving too much isn't to give less. It's to find someone who gives back. She turned her head to look at him. "Is that what you're doing?" she asked. "Giving back." "I'm trying to," he said. "I'm new to it. I'd appreciate your patience." She almost smiled. "You have it," she said. "Apparently." He left her to rest. The trouble started 4 days into the new year, and it came from a direction Nathaniel hadn't anticipated. It came from his own ranch hands. He found out from Riley, the youngest of his 6 men, barely 22, with a face so open and honest that he had never once successfully kept a secret from anyone who was paying attention. Riley caught him in the barn on the morning of the 4th, supposedly to discuss the condition of the north fence, and managed about 45 seconds of genuine fence conversation before his face gave him away entirely. "Spit it out," Nathaniel said. Riley turned his hat in his hands. "The men are there talking, Mr. Carter." "About Miss Bennett?" "Yes, sir." He looked up. "Mostly it's just talk. You know how it is. New situation people got opinions. But—" He stopped. "But what?" "Cole said something last night." Riley's voice went careful. "He said it wasn't right. A woman living in the house with without a he said it looked bad for the ranch. That when people come to do business with you, they'd think—" "What did Cole say, Riley? Exactly?" Riley exhaled. "He said she was probably just working him. Your money, said pretty women with nothing to their name always knew how to land somewhere soft when they got the chance." He met Nathaniel's eyes. "I told him that was a rotten thing to say about a woman who'd been half dead in the road a week ago. He told me I was naive." The barn was very quiet. Nathaniel set down the bridle he'd been holding. He set it down slowly and deliberately, the way you set something down when you want your hands free. "Where is Cole now?" he said. Riley went. Cole Deering was 37 years old and had been at Willow Creek Ranch for 8 years, which was long enough to have made himself comfortable, and comfortable enough to have started confusing familiarity with authority. He was a good cattleman. Nathaniel had never had cause to question that, and he was the kind of man other men deferred to in bunkhouses, which meant his opinions traveled. He came into the barn with the particular expression of a man who knows he's been reported but has decided to be unintimidated about it. "Mr. Carter." "I heard what you said about Miss Bennet," Nathaniel said. Cole didn't flinch. "I said what a lot of people are saying." "I know what a lot of people are saying. I'm talking about what you said, in my bunkhouse, to my men." "I've got a right to my opinion." "You've got a right to your opinion," Nathaniel agreed. "You don't have a right to spread it around in my bunkhouse about a woman who is a guest in my home. A woman who spent 6 weeks saving the families of people in this valley, including, if I recall correctly, your brother-in-law's family out on the Connell Road." Something shifted in Cole's face, just slightly. "The Henderson boy," Nathaniel said. "James, age 4, critical fever 3 nights. She sat with him 3 nights, Cole. Your brother-in-law wrote it in a letter. I've heard him tell the story. He said the nurse wouldn't leave until he turned the corner." He looked at Cole steadily. "That was her. That was the woman you were calling a schemer in my bunkhouse last night." The silence was long. "I didn't know that," Cole said. His voice had changed. The defiance was gone, and what was underneath it was not much more comfortable. The raw, exposed look of a man who has said something ugly and has just discovered it landed on someone who didn't deserve it. "No," Nathaniel said. "You didn't. That's the problem with opinions about strangers. You're usually missing the information that would change them." He paused. "I'm not going to fire you, Cole. You're a good cattleman, and you made a mistake that I expect you're already regretting. But I need it to stop. The talk stops here. From every man in this bunkhouse. If anyone has a problem with Miss Bennet being in this house as my guest, they can come to me directly. Are we understood?" "Yes, sir," Cole said, very quietly. "Good. Get back to work." Cole went. Riley, who had stayed by the door the whole time, looked at Nathaniel with the unguarded admiration of someone very young, watching someone else do something right. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," he said. "Don't thank me. Go fix that north fence." That afternoon, without having been told about the barn conversation, Clara asked to come downstairs, not to do anything, not to go anywhere, just to come downstairs and sit somewhere other than the master bedroom, which she had occupied for 8 days now, and which she was beginning, she told Margaret, to feel personally responsible for. Margaret helped her down and settled her in the sitting room near the fire and brought her tea and a book she hadn't asked for, and then tactfully disappeared in the way Margaret had of making herself absent from rooms where she believed her absence was more useful than her presence. Nathaniel found Clara there an hour later. She had not opened the book. She was sitting with her tea looking at something that wasn't in the room, and she looked up when he came in and then looked at the empty chair across from her in a way that was clearly an invitation. He sat. "You look like you've been dealing with something," she said. "Ranch business." "Ranch business that put that particular expression on your face." He looked at her. "What particular expression?" "The one that means you handled something you didn't enjoy handling, but you handled it correctly." She turned her teacup in her hands. "I've been a disruption to your household." "You've been a guest in my household. A guest who causes disruption is a disruption." She said it without self-pity, just as a clean statement of fact that she had thought through and arrived at honestly. "I know what people are saying, Nathaniel. Margaret doesn't tell me, but she has an expressive face for a woman who thinks she's being careful." It was the first time she had used his given name. He noted it. He didn't say anything about it because drawing attention to it would make it a thing, and he didn't want it to be a thing. He just wanted it to be what it was, which was natural, which was right, which was the sound of something moving in the right direction. "Let them say it," he said. "It matters to your reputation, your business relationships, your—" "Clara." He said her name the same way she'd said his, just her name without weight or ceremony. "I spent 40 years managing what people thought of me. I was very good at it. I was so good at it that I arranged my entire life around the management, and somewhere in there, I forgot to actually live it." He leaned forward in the chair. "I'm not interested in that anymore. I'm interested in—" He gestured a motion that was uncharacteristically inarticulate for him, that took in the room and her and the whole situation. "This. Whatever this is." Clara looked at him with the expression he was coming to recognize as her most honest one. the look she wore when she'd stopped calculating and was just responding. "You're a strange man," she said. "I've been told. I mean it as a compliment." "I know," he said. "That's why I didn't argue." She almost laughed. Not quite. She caught it just before it got all the way out, but he could see it, and it was worth considerably more to him than it had any logical reason to be. "Tell me about this ranch," she said. "Tell me what it was before, what you wanted it to be when you were building it." He looked at her. "I want to understand," she said simply. "You've spent 8 days understanding me. It seems fair." He sat back and he told her. Not the version he told business associates, the numbers, the acreage, the herd counts, the profit margins. The other version. The version that started with his father taking him to the top of the rise when he was 7 years old and showing him the valley below and saying, "All of that is going to belong to you someday. Nathaniel, and what you do with it will say everything worth knowing about who you are." He told her about his mother, who had taught him that a house was not the same as a home, and that the difference between the two had nothing to do with money. He told her about his father's death, and then his mother's 15 years apart, and the way he had responded to each loss by going further in, rather than reaching out, retreating into work, into management, into the clean and uncomplicated satisfaction of a well-run operation. He told her that at some point he had stopped being a person and had become a function. The ranter, the landowner, the man who owned Willow Creek, and that this had seemed for a long time like enough. Clara listened to all of it without interrupting. She had a quality of attention that he had noticed from the beginning, a complete unself-conscious focus that made you feel when you were talking to her that your words were landing somewhere real, that they were being heard and kept, not just processed and filed. "The master bedroom," she said when he'd finished. "You said you hadn't opened it in 20 years. "That's right. Why did you keep it? Why not just use another room? Turn it into a study or—" He was quiet for a moment. "I kept it for the life I was going to have eventually. The family, the wife, the Christmas mornings with children." He looked at his hands. "I kept it locked because I didn't want to admit I'd stopped believing that life was coming. If I opened the door and used the room for something else, it meant—" He stopped. "It meant giving up," Clara said softly. "Yes, and instead you gave it to a stranger." "You weren't a stranger by the time I made the decision." He looked at her. "You were the woman who'd written he is going to live 3 times in a row because she needed to see it to believe it. That's not a stranger. That's a person I wanted to know." The fire crackled. Clara's tea had gone cold, but she wasn't drinking it anyway, just holding the cup. "I want to earn my keep," she said. "While I'm here. I'm not good at being still, and I'm not good at being cared for without reciprocating. It makes me feel—" "I know," he said. "What do you want to do?" "The ranch hands. Do any of them have injuries? Chronic complaints they've been ignoring because getting to town is inconvenient. I could." "Riley sprained his wrist in November and has been wrapping it himself," Nathaniel said. "Bertram has a cough that's been going on too long. One of the fence workers came in last week with a cut on his hand that Margaret is worried about." Clara set down her teacup. "Bring them to me. You're recovering. I can look at a wrist and a hand and listen to a chest while sitting in a chair," she said. "It's not running through a blizzard. It's just being useful." She met his eyes. "Let me be useful, Nathaniel. I'll rest better afterward, I promise you that." He looked at her for a moment. Then he got up and went to find Riley. What happened over the next 3 days happened quietly, the way most important things happen, without announcement, without drama, as a simple accumulation of small true moments that added up to something larger. Clara sat in the sitting room and saw to Riley's wrist and determined it was a minor ligament strain that had been made worse by inadequate wrapping, and she re-wrapped it herself with the efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times. And Riley left the room looking at his hand with the expression of someone who has just had a thing done for them that they'd been quietly suffering through alone. She examined Bertram's cough and told him it was bronchial irritation, probably from the kitchen smoke, and prescribed a particular tea and a daily 10 minutes outside in the fresh air. And Bertram, who had been stubbornly claiming he was fine for 2 months, agreed with the docility of a man who is deeply relieved to be told what the matter is. She cleaned and properly dressed the fence worker's cut, and told him it had been 2 days from going seriously wrong, and he sat very still through the whole procedure, with the focused attention of a man who has just understood how close a thing it was. Word moved through the bunkhouse, not the gossiping kind of word, the other kind, the kind that moves person to person, fact to fact, without embellishment, because the facts are already enough. Cole Deering came to find Nathaniel on the evening of the 6th. He knocked on the study door and came in when called and stood in front of the desk with his hat in his hands and the look of a man who has spent several days preparing what he wants to say and is no longer entirely sure it's adequate. "I'd like to apologize to her," he said. "Miss Bennett, I'd like to—" He stopped, started again. "She doctored my brother-in-law's boy. She spent 3 nights with him, and she didn't know any of us didn't owe us anything. And I said what I said." He shook his head. "It wasn't right. It wasn't fair. And I'd like to tell her that directly if she'd be willing to hear it." Nathaniel looked at him for a moment. "I'll ask her," he said. She was willing. She saw Cole in the sitting room the next morning, and Nathaniel stayed in the hallway and did not listen because it was not his apology to witness. 10 minutes later, Cole came out with the look of a man who has set something heavy down, and he nodded at Nathaniel without a word and went back to work. Nathaniel went in. "Well," he said. "He's a good man who said a bad thing," Clara said. "That's most people, I think. The question is just whether they're able to see it afterward." She paused. "He cried a little. I didn't say anything about it." "Of course you didn't. He told me James was his favorite nephew, that he'd been there the week the boy was sick and felt completely helpless, and he didn't know how to—" She stopped. "He didn't know how to carry that. The gratitude and the helplessness together. I think what came out of him I think it was that. Coming out sideways." Nathaniel sat down. "You're making excuses for the man who called you a schemer." "I'm explaining him," she said. "There's a difference. I'm not excusing it. I understand it." She looked at the window. "Fear makes people say things. Desperation does too. People lash out at what they don't understand because understanding takes work and lashing out is easy." She paused. "Gerald was afraid too, of what choosing me would cost him. He told himself a story where I was the unreasonable one, where I was asking for too much, where the practical choice was the only real choice. He believed it. I think he still believes it." She shook her head. "That doesn't mean I have to go back, but it means I don't have to hate him either." "You're a more generous person than I am," Nathaniel said. "I've just been doing this longer." She looked at him. "Working with sick people, grieving people, desperate people. You learn after a while that most of the ugliness you see isn't malice, it's fear wearing malice's clothes." She paused. "The real malice is rare, and it usually looks very calm." He thought about that. "Is that what you thought when I first came in with Cole's apology, that I was being calm?" She looked at him with the direct gaze. "No, you were angry. I could tell." "I was. But you handled it correctly anyway. That's better than not being angry." She paused. "That's character. That's the actual thing." He looked at her. "You do that," he said. "Do what?" "See people accurately. You look at someone and you tell them exactly what you observe without softening it and without exaggerating it. Just the truth of what you see." He shook his head slightly. "Most people can't do that. Most people soften or they're cruel. You're just accurate." She was quiet for a moment. "A doctor has to be," she said. "If you soften what you see, you misdiagnose. If you exaggerate, you panic the patient unnecessarily. The truth clearly delivered is almost always more useful than either." She paused. "I suppose I do it with people, too. I hadn't thought about it as a skill." "It is," he said. "It's one of the finest ones I've ever seen." She looked away. Not from discomfort exactly. From the particular difficulty of receiving a compliment that was genuinely meant when you have spent years moving too fast to stop and accept anything offered to you. He let her have the moment. Then Clara. She looked back. "Harmon came back this morning. The room changed." He watched her face change, with it not collapse, not crumble, but tighten. The way a person looks when they've been prepared for something, and it arrives anyway, and preparation turns out to be less useful than you hoped. Again, she said. He left a letter. He didn't come to the door, he left it with the boy at the gate. He pulled it from his jacket pocket. It was sealed. He held it out to her. I haven't opened it. She looked at the envelope for a long moment. Her name was written on the front in a neat, precise hand that she would have recognized from across a room. She took it. She looked at it. Then she set it on the table beside her, face down, and looked at Nathaniel. I'll read it, she said. Later, when I'm ready. All right. It won't change anything. I know. I need you to know that, she said. Before I open it, I need you to know that whatever it says, whatever he's written in there, it won't change anything. Nathaniel looked at her steadily. You don't have to say that for my benefit. I'm not saying it for your benefit. She pressed her lips together. I'm saying it for mine. I need to hear myself say it. She looked at the envelope. He has a way of his words are very persuasive. He's a very intelligent man. He knows how to construct an argument, and he knows my... She stopped. He knows where I'm vulnerable. He always has. Then we'll read it together, Nathaniel said. If you want. You read it, I'll be here, and when you're done, we'll talk about whatever it says. She looked at him sharply. You'd do that. If you want it. You'd just sit there, while I read a letter from another man. While you read a letter from your past, he said. Yes, because your past doesn't scare me, Clara. It made you who you are, and who you are is someone I... He stopped himself. Not because the words were wrong, because they were too right for this particular moment, too much for what she needed right now, and saying them would be about what he needed rather than what she did. He knew the difference. He was learning anyway. Who you are is someone worth staying beside, he said instead. That's all. Clara looked at him for a long time. Then she picked up the letter, and she broke the seal, and she began to read. He stayed. Exactly as he'd said he would. He stayed. She read the letter twice. The first time fast. Her eyes moving across the page with the controlled urgency of someone checking a wound, needing to know the extent of the damage before deciding how to respond to it. The second time slowly, her lips pressed together, her breathing careful and deliberate, the way she breathed when she was working and needed her hands to be steady. Nathaniel did not watch her face. He watched his own hands folded in his lap and gave her the privacy of not being observed while she moved through whatever the letter was doing to her. When she finished the second reading, she folded it, set it on the table, looked at it for a moment like it was a patient she had just diagnosed and wasn't sure she could help. Then she said, "He's leaving his wife." The room went very quiet. He says the marriage was a mistake. He says he knew it before the wedding and went through with it anyway, because he had convinced himself that the practical choice was the right choice, and that feelings were, he uses the word, manageable. That feelings were manageable. She said the word with a precision that made it clear how she felt about it. He says he has managed them for 3 months, and they are apparently not as manageable as he believed. Nathaniel said nothing. He says he's spoken with a lawyer. That the senator is that her father is furious that there will be consequences for his career, that he understands what he's giving up, and he has decided to give it up. She looked at the folded letter. He says he came to Montana to ask if there is any possibility. Those are his words. Any possibility. The fire crackled. Outside, one of the horses in the paddock made a sound, and then went quiet. "What do you want to do?" Nathaniel asked. She turned to look at him. He thought she might be checking his face for something, some sign of what he needed her to say. Some signal of the answer he was hoping for. He kept his face even, because this was not about what he hoped. He had meant it when he said it. Her choice was hers. "I don't know," she said. And then immediately, "No, that's not true. I know. I just..." She stopped. "I want to say it clearly. I want to make sure I'm saying it for the right reasons and not the wrong ones. Take your time." "He says he loves me," she said. "He's written it 4 times, in 4 different ways, as if repetition is evidence." She shook her head. But Gerald has always been better at constructing love than feeling it. He knows the architecture of it, the words, the gestures, the right moments. He studied it the way he studied medicine. He's very good at applying it. She looked at her bandaged hands. The difference is that medicine works whether you feel it or not. Love doesn't. No, Nathaniel agreed. It doesn't. He chose a senator's daughter because she was the correct next piece in a life he had planned very carefully. And then the piece didn't fit, and now he wants to go back to the previous piece. She looked up. I am not a piece. I spent a long time not understanding that. Not understanding that being treated like a piece that fit well was not the same as being loved. She shook her head. I understand it now. I understood it somewhere in a barn in December when I was out of medicine and out of food, and there was nobody coming, and I had to keep going anyway. I understood it then. The version of me that would have said yes to that letter doesn't exist anymore. Nathaniel let out a breath he hadn't been entirely aware of holding. Are you certain? He asked. I'm certain. She looked at him directly. Are you going to tell me I should think about it more carefully, that I might be making a hasty decision, that I've been through an ordeal and I'm not? No, he said. You're one of the clearest thinking people I've ever encountered. If you say you're certain, I believe you. Something shifted in her face. Something that had been braced against something relaxed. I need to write him a reply, she said. I need to write it today before I lose the clarity. She looked around the room. Do you have paper and something to write with? He went to the study and came back with paper and pen and ink, and he set them on the table in front of her and moved to the chair across the room far enough to give her privacy, close enough that she knew he was there. She wrote for 15 minutes. He did not try to read what she wrote. When she finished, she sealed the envelope herself and held it out to him. Will you have someone take this to the hotel in Millhaven? I assume that's where he's staying. I'll take it myself, Nathaniel said. She looked at him. Today, he said. This afternoon. So there's no question that it was delivered. She nodded. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were clear. She looked like a woman who had just set down something heavy and was taking stock of her own shoulders, checking whether they were still the same shape, finding out they were feeling the surprise of that. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me. I keep saying that and you keep thanking me for things that don't require thanks, he said. Being present while you do something difficult isn't a service I'm providing. It's just, he paused. It's just what you do, for someone who matters. The words landed in the room and stayed there. Clara looked at him for a long moment. Something moved through her face that was not quite an answer to what he'd said, and not quite a question either. Something more like an acknowledgement. Like a person hearing a sound they'd almost forgotten existed, and remembering with the hearing of it that they had missed it. She looked away first. Go deliver the letter, she said quietly, and then come back. He went. He found Harmon at the hotel, as expected. The man was in the dining room with coffee. He wasn't drinking a letter. He'd apparently been composing, and had abandoned, and the general appearance of someone who has staked a great deal on an uncertain outcome, and is waiting to find out if the stake was sound. He looked up when Nathaniel walked in. His face went through several things quickly. Hope, calculation, dread, the effort to appear composed through all of them. Nathaniel set the letter on the table in front of him. He didn't sit. She wrote it herself, Nathaniel said. An hour after reading yours. Harmon looked at the envelope. He picked it up. He held it without opening it and looked at Nathaniel with an expression that had finally, under all the composure and the calculation, gotten honest. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had made a series of very intelligent decisions that had somehow added up to a life he didn't want. She's not coming back, Harmon said. No. Because of you. Because of herself, Nathaniel said. Who she became out here. Who she found out she was when there was nobody left to perform for. He paused. You didn't lose her to me, Dr. Harmon. You lost her to 6 weeks in a Montana winter with nothing but her own character for company. I was there at the end of it. Harmon was quiet. She's remarkable, he said finally. It came out stripped of everything but the truth of it. No strategy, no subtext. Just a man saying an accurate thing about someone he had not been adequate to. I know, Nathaniel said. You'll take care of her. It wasn't quite a question. I intend to try, Nathaniel said. Though from what I've seen, she's more than capable of taking care of herself. What she needs isn't taken care of. What she needs is— He thought about how to say it. Someone who stays. Someone who thinks her needs are worth the same consideration she gives everyone else's. Someone who doesn't ask her to be less than she is, because less is more convenient. Harmon looked at the letter in his hands. He turned it over once, twice. I could have been that, he said. I think I could have been. Maybe, Nathaniel said. But you weren't. And that's the only version that counts. He left the man sitting with the letter and walked out into the January cold and rode back up the hill to Willow Creek Ranch, and the whole way up, he thought about what Harmon had said. I think I could have been, and the particular tragedy of a life built on what a person thought they could have been, rather than what they actually chose. He had come very close to the same thing. 40 years of thinking he could have been different if the circumstances had been right. If the time had been right. If the right person had arrived. The right person had arrived in the road on Christmas Eve, half dead in the snow, with a medical bag and a notebook full of other people's names. And the circumstances would never have been right if he hadn't made them right. He rode through the gate of Willow Creek Ranch and handed General to Riley and went inside, and Clara was in the sitting room where he'd left her, and she looked up when he came in. Done, she said. Done, he said. She nodded once, and then she said, Sit down. I want to talk to you about something. He sat. She had been thinking while he was gone. He could see it in the particular quality of her stillness, the arrangement of her thoughts just behind her eyes. She had been sitting here working through something, and she had arrived at it, and now she was going to say it directly, the way she said everything. I want to stay, she said. He went very still. Not indefinitely. Not without I'm not asking you to. She stopped, took a breath, started again. I mean, I want to stay in this county, in this valley. The people here need medical care. They've been making do with Dr. Aldridge, who is competent, but has more patients than he can adequately serve, and who cannot, practically speaking, reach the outlying farms in bad weather. She met his eyes. I could help with that. I could do real work here. Meaningful work. She paused. I'm asking if there's a place on your property where I could establish something small. A clinic. Nothing elaborate, a room, a supply of basic medicines, a regular schedule of visits to the farms that can't come to me. Nathaniel looked at her. You want to stay, he said. In the valley. Yes. And you want to build a clinic. A small one. I'm not asking you to fund it. There are organizations, medical societies I can write to. Clara. He said it quietly. Stop building the argument. I'm not going to say no. I'm trying to— He paused. I'm trying to make sure I understand what you're asking. She met his gaze. I'm asking for a place to belong, she said. I'm asking for somewhere to put down something that lasts longer than a season. She paused. I've been moving since October. Before October in St. Louis, I was standing still in ways that were worse than moving. I think— She stopped. I think this is the place. I think these are the people. A beat. I think you might be— She didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need her to. Yes, he said. Yes, I can stay. Yes to all of it, he said. The stay, the clinic, the— He gestured the same inarticulate motion he'd made before, the one that took in too much to be named precisely. All of it. Yes. Clara exhaled. It was not a dramatic exhale, not the exhale of a scene in a story. It was the exhale of a body releasing something it had been carrying longer than it should have, a quiet, private, deeply real sound. Thank you, she said. Don't— I know you're going to tell me not to thank you, she said. But this one I'm keeping. You can't have it back. He almost laughed. Not quite, but close. The first crisis arrived 12 days into January, and it arrived in the form of Margaret Ellis coming to find Nathaniel in the study at 7 in the morning, with an expression that told him immediately that something had gone wrong somewhere that mattered. There's a boy at the gate, Margaret said. 8 years old, maybe 9. He came alone. His horse is spent. He rode it hard from somewhere out east, I think. He's asking for the nurse. Nathaniel was on his feet before Margaret finished the sentence. The boy was a Calloway. Nathaniel placed the family after a moment. Eastern Acreage, good people, 3 children. The boy's name was Patrick, and he was sitting on the gate post with the concentrated stillness of a child who has been told to be brave and is using every bit of himself to manage it. "It's my ma," Patrick said. "She's having the baby, and something's wrong. Pa sent me for the doctor, but the doctor's not in town." "How far?" Nathaniel said. 7 miles, maybe 8. "Is your father with her?" "Yes, sir, and my older sister. But Pa says—" The boy's voice cracked just once, and he pulled it back with a visible effort. "Pa says come fast." Nathaniel put his hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did exactly right coming here. You did good, son. Now go inside and find the woman named Margaret and tell her I said to give you breakfast and let you warm up. Can you do that?" The boy nodded. "Good." Nathaniel was already turning toward the house. Clara was in the kitchen when he came through the door. She took one look at his face and stood up. "What happened?" "Woman in labor 8 miles east. Complications. Doctor's not in town." He looked at her. "How are you?" "I'm fine." "Clara, honestly." She looked at him steadily. "I'm well enough for this. I've been well enough for 3 days, I just hadn't found the right moment to tell you." She was already moving toward the stairs. "I need 5 minutes in my bag. Have a horse ready." "I'm coming with you." She paused on the 3rd step and looked back at him. "You don't have to. 8 miles in January," he said. "I'm coming." She didn't argue. She went upstairs, and he went to the barn and had 2 horses ready in 4 minutes, and when Clara came out, she had her medical bag over her shoulder, and she was wearing the coat Margaret had found for her heavy wool well made, and she looked for the first time since he'd found her in the road like herself. Like the woman from the notebook. Like someone who knew exactly where she was going and why. They rode fast. The cold was sharp, and the road was hard, and Clara kept up with him without complaint, riding with the practical efficiency of a woman who had spent months on horseback and wasn't sentimental about it. Halfway there, she said without slowing, "Tell me everything you know about the family." "Calloway. Daniel and Ruth. 3 children. The oldest is a girl, maybe 12, 13. They've been on that land 6 years. Good farmers. Decent people." "How far along is she?" "I don't know. The boy didn't say." "First 3 children were normal deliveries." "I have no idea." "I'll find out when we get there." She leaned forward slightly, urging her horse. "Ride faster." He rode faster. They arrived to find Daniel Calloway standing in the yard with the particular paralysis of a man whose competence in every other area of life has just failed to prepare him for this one. He was a big man, broad-shouldered, the kind of man who fixed things, and he was completely undone. He looked at Clara like she was something he'd prayed for. "She started in the night," he said. "It's been too long. She had the others fast, all 3, and this one it's been too long, and she's—" "Take me to her," Clara said. Nathaniel stayed in the yard with Daniel because Clara had given him a look at the door that told him clearly she needed the room without extra people in it, and he understood that. He understood the look, the economy of it, the way she communicated precise information without wasting words. He sat with Daniel Calloway in the cold January yard and talked about cattle and fences and nothing in particular, the way men talk when they are doing the only thing available to them, which is waiting. 40 minutes later, the oldest Calloway girl came out of the house with her face lit up like something that had been dark for a long time had just turned on. "He's here," she said. "Mama's all right. The baby's here. She says come in." Daniel Calloway made a sound that was not quite a word. He was inside before the girl finished speaking. Nathaniel sat in the yard alone and looked up at the January sky and felt something move through him, that he didn't have a name for, something that was partly relief and partly the particular emotion of watching someone you care about do exactly what they were meant to do, and understanding that you have the extraordinary luck of being in proximity to it. I went inside 15 minutes later when it seemed right. Ruth Calloway was pale and tired and had never looked more alive. The baby was red-faced and loud about the whole situation. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed holding his wife's hand, with the grip of a man who has no intention of letting go for a considerable amount of time. Clara was at the basin across the room washing her hands, and she looked over her shoulder when Nathaniel came in with the brisk satisfaction of a person whose work has gone right. "Healthy boy," she said. "Ruth did beautifully. She'll need rest, and she'll need someone to check on her in a week, and I'll want to come back myself in 3 days if the roads are passable." Ruth Calloway reached out from the bed. Clara came to her, and the woman took her hand and pressed it and said something too quiet to hear from across the room, and Clara bent down and said something back, and whatever passed between them in that moment was private enough that Nathaniel looked at the wall. On the way back, they rode slower. The urgency was gone, and they let the horses find their own pace, and for a while, neither of them said anything, and the silence was the comfortable kind, the kind that exists between people who have been through something together and don't need to narrate it. "You were extraordinary in there," Nathaniel said finally. "I was just doing what needed doing." "You keep saying that. You keep calling it extraordinary." "Because it is," he said. "The fact that you can't see it doesn't make it less true." She looked over at him. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold, and she was tired. He could see the tiredness around her eyes, but underneath it, she was alive in a way she hadn't been in the sitting room or the master bedroom. She was alive in the way that people are alive when they are doing the thing they were built for. "The clinic," she said. "I've been thinking about the layout. If we used the small outbuilding south of the main house, the one that was a tack room, I think it would only need the one interior wall taken down, and if the south window were widened to let in more light." He smiled. He couldn't help it. "What?" she said. "You're planning the clinic while recovering from delivering a baby in January, after recovering from a fever." He shook his head. "You are the most relentlessly forward-moving person I have ever encountered." "Is that a complaint?" "It's an observation made with complete admiration." She looked at him. Something about that landed differently than the other compliments. Maybe because she was tired enough that her defenses were down. Maybe because the morning had stripped away a layer of something and left her more accessible than usual. "I like it here," she said quietly. "I didn't expect to say that. I expected to recover and move on to the next place that needed me. I didn't expect to—" She paused. "I didn't expect this." "This," he said carefully. "The ranch, the valley." She looked ahead. "You." The word was small, and it carried everything. He let it settle before he responded. Let it be what it was, without rushing toward it. "Good," he said, quietly, meaning it. They rode the rest of the way in silence, and it was the best silence Nathaniel Carter could remember. In a very long time, the silence of two people moving in the same direction at the same pace, without either one needing to be somewhere the other wasn't. Chakag. The twist came 3 days later, and it came from a source Nathaniel hadn't considered, which was what made it so effective. It came from Margaret. She came to his study on the evening of the 17th, and she sat down across from him, without being asked, which she had never done in 11 years of working at Willow Creek Ranch, and he knew immediately that whatever she was about to say was serious. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Something I should have told you sooner. I kept waiting for the right moment, and I've realized there isn't going to be a right moment, so I'm just going to say it." He set down his pen. "All right. I know who Clara is," Margaret said. "I mean, I know more about who she is than I told you when you first brought her in." She folded her hands in her lap. "I didn't know her personally, but I knew of her, before she came north. I knew of her from my sister. My sister lives in St. Louis and worked near the hospital district. She wrote to me about a nurse who did something extraordinary. Last summer, before any of this. Before the epidemic." Nathaniel waited. "There was a tenement fire in St. Louis," Margaret said. "In July. A whole block, 40 families, maybe more. The fire department got there too late for the building, but people got out, most of them, and there were injuries everywhere, and the hospital couldn't handle the volume." She paused. "This nurse Clara, she worked for 36 hours without stopping. My sister said it was the thing people talked about afterward. Not the fire, not the building. The nurse. She organized the other medical staff. She triaged, she treated, she directed people. She didn't sleep. She didn't eat. And then when it was over, she went back to her regular duties the next morning. Margaret stopped. And then 3 months later, she handed in her notice and came north. Nathaniel was looking at her carefully. "What are you telling me, Margaret?" "I'm telling you that the man she left, Dr. Harmon, he was there during the fire too. He was the senior physician on duty." Margaret met his eyes. "My sister said he went home at the 12-hour mark. He cited protocol. The hospital had a policy about physician fatigue, about mandatory rest periods. He cited protocol and he went home. And Clara stayed." The room was very quiet. "He went home," Nathaniel said slowly. "He went home. And in the morning when he came back, she had done in his absence what he had left." Margaret paused. "My sister said the staff talked about it for weeks. Not openly, he was still the senior physician. There were professional consequences to saying it plainly. But they talked about it." She looked at her hands. "I think that's why she left. I don't think it was only the wedding. I think the wedding was the moment she was able to name a thing she already knew. That the man she'd built her life around was the kind of man who cited protocol and went home." Nathaniel sat with that for a long time. He thought about Gerald Harmon standing in his front hall with his expensive coat and his careful hands. He thought about, "I think I could have been that sitting at the hotel table with a letter he was afraid to open." He thought about the man who had told Clara that her feelings were manageable and had believed it, because for him they were, because the kind of love Gerald Harmon was capable of was the kind you could set down when it became inconvenient. And he thought about Clara, 36 hours in the July heat, organizing a disaster because nobody else was going to. Writing. "He is going to live 3 times in December because she needed to see it. Collapsing in the road because she had given everything she had and hadn't saved one single thing for herself." He stood up abruptly. He went to the door. "Where are you going?" Margaret said. "To tell her that I know," Nathaniel said. "She deserves to know that I know. All of it." "Nathaniel." "She's been carrying that story alone," he said. "The fire, Harmon, all of it. She told me the version that made sense from the outside, the wedding, the loss, the leaving. She didn't tell me what it cost her to find out who he was. And I've been sitting here with this piece of it, and she doesn't know I have it." He shook his head. "I'm not going to keep things from her. That's not who I want to be." Margaret looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something she very rarely said. "I'm proud of you." He went upstairs. Clara was reading by the fire, and she looked up when he knocked and came in, and something in his expression made her close the book immediately. "What happened?" she said. He sat. He told her everything Margaret had told him. All of it straight through, without softening and without embellishment. He watched her face while he talked. She didn't collapse. She didn't cry. She listened with the focused stillness of someone who has been shown a mirror and is deciding whether to look directly into it or look at the floor. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You came to tell me." "Yes." "You could have not said anything. I'd have never known you knew." "I know." "Why did you tell me?" He looked at her steadily. "Because the version of this," he gestured between them, "whatever this is becoming, the version of this I want doesn't have things in it that I know and you don't. It doesn't have me holding something you gave up and not telling you I'm holding it." He paused. "You've spent a long time with people who knew things about you and used the knowing as leverage. I'm not going to be that. Not ever." Clara looked at him. Her eyes were bright. She was not going to cry. He could see her making that decision clearly, the same way she made every decision, with a directness that left no room for ambiguity about her intentions. But her hands in her lap were shaking slightly. He reached out. He covered them with one of his, not grasping, not holding, just present. Just there. She looked down at his hand on hers. Then she turned her hand over and held on. "He went home," she said quietly. "In the middle of it. I didn't tell anyone. I told myself protocol was protocol, and that he'd made the correct professional decision, and that I told myself I was being unreasonable to feel what I felt about it." She shook her head. "And then 3 months later he chose the senator's daughter, and I understood that the fire wasn't a separate thing. It was the same thing. The same man making the same calculation. That his comfort was worth more than his presence when presence cost something." "Yes," Nathaniel said. And you're telling me you know this, and you wanted me to know you know it? Yes. She looked up at him. Why does that matter so much to me right now? She said. Why does that feel like the most important thing anyone has done? He thought about it seriously the way she deserved. Because you've been explaining yourself, he said. Your whole life maybe, or at least since July. Explaining to yourself why it was reasonable, why it was fine, why you were the one who misunderstood something. And I'm just... He paused. I'm just telling you that you didn't misunderstand anything. What you saw was real. What you felt was accurate. You were right, and it cost you, and I know it, and I'm not going to pretend I don't. Clara looked at him for a long time. The fire crackled. Her hands were still in his. Nathaniel, she said. Yes. I think I'm falling in love with you. She said it the same way she said everything directly clearly, without the softening that most people used around words that big. She said it like a diagnosis, like something she had observed and verified and was now reporting accurately. He felt it move through him like the first warm thing after a long cold. I think I've been in love with you, he said quietly, since I read that notebook. She looked at him. That's not possible. You didn't know me. I knew enough, he said. He is going to live 3 times in a row. That was enough. Something cracked open in her face. Not broke cracked open the way the ground cracks open in spring to let something through. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against his shoulder. Just that. Just that small, exhausted, true gesture of a person who has finally arrived somewhere after a very long journey and is allowing themselves to feel that they have arrived. He put his arm around her, carefully, like something he wanted to protect. Outside the window, the Montana winter was going on in the way winters do, indifferent, vast, cold enough to kill. But inside the room beside the fire, 2 people who had each spent a long time being the wrong kind of alone were doing the quiet, difficult, necessary work of no longer being that. And that was enough. For right now, that was everything. She didn't move from his shoulder for a long time. Not because she was weak, he understood that clearly. Clara Bennett was not a woman who did anything out of weakness. She stayed because she had chosen to, and choosing to stay was an act that had cost her more than most people would ever understand, because staying required trust, and trust was something she had spent the better part of a year dismantling carefully, piece by piece, the way you dismantle something dangerous. When she finally lifted her head, she didn't apologize for the moment. He was glad of that. An apology would have diminished it, made it small, turned it into something she needed to explain, rather than something that simply was. I need you to understand something, she said. Her voice was steady. I don't say things I don't mean. I'm not someone who speaks from emotion and revises later. So when I told you what I told you just now, I meant it the way I mean a diagnosis, clearly, after examination. I know, he said. I'm telling you because I need you to take it seriously, not as a romantic moment, as information. She looked at him. About what I intend. What do you intend? He asked. She held his gaze. To stay. To build something here that lasts. To be someone you can count on the way you've been someone I could count on. She paused. I'm not good at being cared for. You've seen that. I fight it. I find ways around it. I convert every kindness into a debt I need to pay off. She shook her head. I'm going to try to stop doing that. I'm telling you so you can hold me to it. Nathaniel looked at her for a moment. And if you don't manage it right away, then I expect you to be patient. I think I can manage that. And I expect you to tell me when I'm doing it. When I'm deflecting or managing or converting. I expect you to say so directly, not carefully, not gently directly. She met his eyes. Can you do that? Clara, he said. I found a woman unconscious in a snowstorm and brought her home and gave her my best room and read her private notebook and told her an uncomfortable truth about herself tonight because I thought she deserved to know it. He paused. I am not a man who does things carefully when directly is available. Something that was almost a laugh moved through her. No, I suppose you're not. Good, he said. Then we understand each other. We understand each other, she agreed. It was, Nathaniel thought, the most honest agreement he had ever made with another person. Not pretty, Not romantic in the way stories were romantic. Just two people deciding with their eyes open and their facts straight to be what each other needed. It was better than any other kind. The clinic became real in February. Not as an idea, not as a plan, as an actual physical thing that men built with their hands out of the small outbuilding south of the main house, while Clara stood nearby with a list of specifications and the expression of someone supervising a surgery. Nathaniel had offered money. She had accepted it with considerably less argument than he'd expected, which told him that the shift she'd promised, the one where she stopped converting every kindness into a debt, was already beginning to take hold. She did not, however, accept the money quietly. "I'll pay it back," she said on the morning he handed her the figure he'd budgeted for the conversion. "You don't—" "Not to you," she said. "Not as a debt. But in 10 years, I want there to be a real clinic here, a proper one, with a trained staff and enough medicine to last a winter and beds for patients who can't be moved." She looked at the number on this paper. "This is the beginning of that. I'm going to treat it that way." He looked at her. 10 years, he said. "At least. You're planning to be here in 10 years. She looked at him steadily. "I told you what I intended. I meant it." He nodded once. "Then you'd better make sure the south wall faces the right direction. You'll want the morning light for examinations." She went back to her list. He went back to his, which was currently the question of how you build a life with someone after you've spent 40 years convinced you didn't particularly need one. It turned out, you built it the same way you built everything else at Willow Creek Ranch. One post at a time, one decision at a time, without waiting for the perfect conditions that were never actually going to arrive. Riley turned out to be a natural carpenter, and threw himself into the clinic construction with an enthusiasm that Nathaniel suspected had less to do with the building and more to do with finding excuses to be near the nurse who had fixed his wrist. Clara was brisk with him and completely oblivious to the admiration which was so consistent with her character that Nathaniel found it more endearing than alarming. Margaret, who found everything out, eventually informed Nathaniel of the situation with a completely straight face one morning over coffee. "Riley is in love with her," she said. "I know." "You're not concerned. Riley is 22, and Clara thinks of him approximately the way she thinks of all her patients, with affection and professional focus and absolutely no personal dimension whatsoever." He picked up his coffee. "I'm not concerned." Margaret considered this. "You're very calm about it." "I trust her." Margaret looked at him over her cup. "Just like that." "Just like that," he said. She set her cup down. "Do you know how long it's been since you trusted anyone just like that?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew. The clinic opened on the 1st of March, which was not a warm day. Montana didn't do warm in March as a rule, but it was clear, and the light came through the widened south window exactly the way Clara had specified, and when she stood in the middle of the room and turned around once slowly looking at what had been built, Nathaniel watched her face do something he had not seen it do before. She let herself feel it, not processed it, not moved immediately to what came next, just felt it, the way it felt to have a thing she had built with intention and effort and belief standing real in front of her. She stood in the middle of her clinic and let herself feel it, and it lasted about 15 seconds, and then she picked up her bag and got to work. He went back to the ranch house smiling. The first patients came that afternoon. 2 farm wives who had been waiting for something like this for years and arrived 20 minutes apart with complaints that were real but not urgent, and Nathaniel suspected the timing had less to do with medical necessity and more to do with wanting to be among the first through the door. Clara received them both with the same focused attention she gave everything, and sent them home with treatments and instructions, and the clear implication that she expected them to follow through. Word moved through the valley, the way Clara moved through it, fast, purposeful, leaving things better than they found them. By the end of the first week, she had seen 11 patients. By the end of the second, 19. By the end of March, people were coming from 2 counties over, and Dr. Aldridge, who had initially regarded the clinic with the professional wariness of a man encountering potential competition, came to see her on a Thursday afternoon and left 2 hours later, having agreed to a referral arrangement that would serve both their practices and, more importantly, the people who needed them. Nathaniel watched all of this from a middle distance, the way you watch something you believe in with attention and without interference. I was learning that. Learning when to step forward and when to stay back. Learning which problems were his to solve, and which were hers, and which ones they needed to solve together, and that the distinction mattered enormously and was not always obvious. One evening in late March, he made a mistake. It was a small one. But with Clara, even small ones were worth examining. A man had come to the clinic, a large man, not a local, with the particular look of someone passing through, rather than someone who belonged, and something about his manner had made Nathaniel uncomfortable in a way he couldn't name precisely. He had sent Riley to the clinic on a manufactured errand while the man was there, just to have someone present without telling Clara why. Clara found out. She had the exact instincts for these things that you would expect of a woman who had traveled alone through a Montana winter, and she noticed Riley's presence immediately, and its cause shortly after. She came to find Nathaniel that evening. "You sent Riley to watch over me," she said. "I sent Riley on an errand." Nathaniel. He looked at her. "The man made me uneasy. I didn't know why. I acted on the instinct. I have been managing difficult patients alone since before I came to this valley," she said. "I am capable of—" "I know you're capable," he said. "That's not why I did it." She stopped. "I did it because I was worried," he said. "Not because I think you can't handle yourself, because I—" He stopped. Tried again. "Because the idea of something happening to you is not something I can be rational about. I'm working on that. But it's going to take some time." He met her eyes. "I'm not trying to manage you. I'm just not entirely in control of what I do when I'm scared." The anger in her face shifted. Not disappeared. Clara Bennett's feelings didn't disappear. They transformed, but it moved into something more complex. Something that was grappling with the difference between being protected and being doubted, and finding maybe that the line between them was thinner than she'd assumed. "You could have told me," she said. "You could have said, 'I don't like the look of that man, would you mind if Riley stopped by?' I would have said yes." "You're right," he said. "I should have. I acted unilaterally, and I should have talked to you first. That's the mistake." She looked at him for a moment. "That's it. You're just agreeing." "You're right. I was wrong. That seems like the appropriate response." He paused. "Was there something else you needed?" She opened her mouth, closed it, and then unexpectedly she laughed a real laugh, short and surprised, the kind that escapes before you can decide whether to let it. "You are the most disarming man," she said. "I've been told that's a Carter family quality," he said. "My mother could end an argument in 3 sentences. I've never quite matched her record, but I'm working on it." She shook her head. "Don't send Riley on fake errands again." "I'll tell you first." "And I'll say yes," she said. "Probably. If you tell me first, I'll probably say yes." That's all I needed to know. The twist that changed everything arrived on a Tuesday in early April, and it had nothing to do with Gerald Harmon or ranch gossip or any of the difficulties they had already navigated. It came in the form of a letter from St. Louis. Not from Harmon, from the Medical Society. Clara brought it to Nathaniel in the study, which itself told him something. She could have read it alone, could have processed it privately in the clinic or the master bedroom or any of the spaces that had become hers over the past 3 months. She brought it to him because she had learned slowly and with visible effort that things that mattered to her were allowed to matter to him too. "They're offering me a position," she said. "The Medical Society in St. Louis. They've heard about the clinic. I don't know how word travels, and they've been appointed to establish a network of rural medical outposts across the territory. They want a director, someone who understands rural medicine, who can train other nurses, who has experience with epidemic response." She set the letter on his desk. "They're offering it to me." He looked at the letter, then at her. "Is it a good position?" he asked. "It's an extraordinary position," she said. "It's the kind of position I would have given 3 years ago. I would have given almost anything for this." She sat down across from him. "It's based in St. Louis, with travel throughout the territory." The room was very quiet. "What do you want to do?" he asked. She looked at him steadily. "I want to know what you think. I think it's an extraordinary position, and you should be proud they offered it to you." He paused. "That's not what you're asking." "No, it isn't." He leaned forward. "Tell me what the choice actually is. Not the version where you decide alone. The real version." She took a breath. "The real version is that I have built something here. Something real, the clinic, these families, this valley. I have 23 patients who depend on regular care that didn't exist 4 months ago. I have the Callaway baby growing up healthy. I have relationships with every farm family within 8 miles." She paused. "And I have—" She stopped. "Say it," he said. "I have you," she said quietly. "And this house. And Margaret and Riley and Cole, who apologized to me, and Bertram, who makes coffee exactly the way I like it without being asked." She looked at her hands. "I have a place. For the first time in my adult life, I have an actual place, and I am not at all certain I understand how to walk away from it, or whether I want to." "Then don't," he said. She looked up. "Right back," he said. "Tell them you're honored. Tell them you'd like to propose an alternative, a regional model. You stay here, you run this clinic, you help them design the network from the experience you've already built. You train the nurses they send to other counties. You consult." He paused. "You don't have to go back to St. Louis to serve the territory. You're already serving it." Clara stared at him. "You thought about that quickly," she said. "I've been thinking about it since you walked through the door with that letter." He met her eyes. "I'm not asking you to stay for me. I'm asking you to consider whether the best version of what you want to do requires you to leave, or whether it can be built from here." She was quiet for a long time. "You'd help me write the proposal," she said. "Tonight if you want." She looked at him. "Why?" "Because your work matters," he said simply. "And because the best version of you is the version that's here doing this, being exactly who you are. And I'm not interested in a version of this." He gestured between them. "That requires you to be less than that." He paused. "Whatever we are to each other, it has to make you more yourself, not less. If it ever makes you less, it isn't worth it." Clara looked at him for a long time. "That," she said quietly, "is the most no one has ever—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. She was not going to cry in his study. He could see the decision being made. "That is the most generous thing anyone has ever said to me." "It's just true," he said. "It's just true," she echoed. And she almost laughed the way she sometimes did when he reflected her own phrases back at her from a direction she hadn't expected. "Write the letter," he said. "I'll make coffee. Bertram's already gone to bed, but I've been watching him long enough to manage it." She looked at him with that direct, accurate gaze that had been taking his measure for 3 months now, and continued apparently to find what it was looking for. "Nathaniel," she said. "Yes. I love you." Not like the first time she'd said it, the diagnosis version careful and precise, and somewhat armored. This time it was just said. Just the fact of it plain in the air between them, requiring nothing. He felt it the same way he'd felt it the first time, like warmth after cold, like arriving. "I know," he said. "I love you too." He stood up. "Now write the letter. We can be sentimental later." She picked up the pen. The Medical Society wrote back in 3 weeks. They accepted her proposal with modifications, which she negotiated in 2 subsequent letters, with the brisk efficiency of a woman who had learned over years of working in under-resourced environments that the first offer was never the final one, and that the people who got what their patients needed were the ones who asked for it clearly and didn't flinch when they were told no. She got almost everything she'd asked for. The night the final letter arrived, Margaret made a dinner that was noticeably better than usual, which was Margaret's way of celebrating things she approved of, without making a production of it. And Riley somehow found out, and appeared at the kitchen door with his hat in his hands, and an expression of such genuine happiness for her, that Clara looked at him for a moment, with the softened attention she reserved for patients recovering from something, and then thanked him by name, and he left, looking like a man who has been given a gift he will keep for a long time. Cole Deering found his own way. He was in the yard the next morning when Clara came out to the clinic, and he stopped what he was doing and said without preamble, "I heard about the medical society. Congratulations, Miss Bennett." And then he went back to work, and that was that, and it was better than any speech. Bertram left a slice of pie on her clinic desk without explanation. She ate it between patients and didn't say anything about it to anyone, but she was smiling when the next patient came in. Nathaniel proposed on a morning in May. Not because he had planned the exact morning he had planned to propose, had thought about it carefully, had even at Margaret's pointed suggestion, acquired a ring. But the morning itself chose him, rather than the other way around. The way the right moments tend to do when you've stopped trying to engineer them and started paying attention to what's already there. Clara was on the porch of the clinic before her first patient, sitting with her coffee, looking out over the valley. The way the valley looked from that angle in May was something that still stopped her. He knew she had told him once early in spring that she had not expected Montana to be beautiful. She had come in winter, had seen it harsh and white and demanding, and then spring had arrived and something had happened to the light and to the land, and she had been surprised by it in a way that clearly delighted her, because Clara Bennett was a person who valued being surprised by beauty she hadn't anticipated. He came and sat beside her. They drank coffee. She said, "Riley's wrist is fully healed. He doesn't need the wrap anymore." He said, "I know. He told me yesterday. He seemed vaguely sorry about it." She smiled. "I noticed." A pause. He set down his coffee. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out the ring and set it on the railing in front of her. She looked at it. She looked at him. "That's a ring," she said. "It is." "You're proposing." "I am." He paused. "I had a speech. I've been working on it for 3 weeks. It had several points and what I thought was a fairly well-constructed argument." He looked at the ring. "I don't want to give it." She turned to face him. "Why not?" "Because you don't need an argument. You're not a jury I'm trying to persuade. You're the person I want to spend the rest of my life with, and either that's something you want or it isn't, and a speech isn't going to change which one is true." He met her eyes. "So I'm just asking, without the architecture of it, just will you?" Clara looked at him for a long moment. She picked up the ring, turned it in her fingers, looked at it the way she looked at everything she was deciding about, completely carefully, without hurry. Then she put it on. "Yes," she said. "Obviously yes." He exhaled. "Obviously," he said. "Did you think I was going to say no? I thought there was a reasonable possibility. Nathaniel." She looked at him with the expression he loved most, the one that was equal parts affection and exasperation, and underneath both of them, a bedrock of absolute certainty. "I turned down a career-defining position in St. Louis to stay in this valley. I negotiated a consultation arrangement so I could keep living here. I have been in love with you since January." She raised an eyebrow. "What exactly did you think the ring was going to encounter?" He stared at her. Then he laughed. Fully, genuinely the kind of laugh that had been a long time coming to Willow Creek Ranch. The kind that belonged in a house with people in it, with a fire and coffee, and someone across from you who tells you the truth without softening it. "I thought there was a reasonable possibility," he said again, because it was still true, and she was still wrong to think it hadn't been. She took his hand. "There wasn't," she said. "There really genuinely wasn't." They married in June. Not a grand affair. Clara had opinions about grand affairs, specifically that they were money spent on performance rather than on the thing itself, and that the thing itself was what mattered. Nathaniel had no particular attachment to grandeur for its own sake, having had plenty of it, and found it largely insufficient. So it was simple. The Valley people came, which meant roughly 80 people who brought food and goodwill in roughly equal quantities, and Judge Foster, who had come around completely by April, having watched the clinic transform his county in ways he hadn't anticipated, performed the ceremony on the porch of Willow Creek Ranch. Margaret cried, which she would deny until her dying day. Riley held his hat over his heart through the entire ceremony and did not look like a man in mourning, which was, Nathaniel thought, a sign of genuine character. Cole Deering shook Nathaniel's hand afterward and said, She's the finest woman in this county. Then after a pause, present company. Then realizing that hadn't been clear, I meant Margaret. I know what you meant, Cole, Nathaniel said. Thank you. Bertram made the cake, which was extraordinary, and took the compliments on it with the expression of a man who had expected nothing less. The Calloway family came. Ruth brought the baby 4 months old, and already in his mother's opinion, displaying exceptional intelligence. Clara held him for 20 minutes and did not want to give him back, and Nathaniel watched her holding that baby and felt something clarify inside him that had been slightly blurred since January, a picture coming fully into focus. I went to find her later, when the guests were beginning to thin, and the evening was turning cool, and she was standing at the edge of the porch, looking out over the valley, in the particular way she had of looking at it, like she was accounting for it, like she was making sure all its people were still there, and still all right. Ruth's baby, he said, coming to stand beside her. He's perfect, she said. He's absolutely perfect. Clara. She looked at him. Someday, he said. She held his gaze. Someday, she agreed. It was everything that needed to be said about it. They were people who understood that some things didn't need architecture, just intent, just the agreement between two people that the future was a direction they were both walking in. She leaned against him. He put his arm around her. Below them, the valley was settling into evening, and the lights were coming on in farmhouses across the land, all those families they knew by name. Now, all those people whose lives Clara had moved through and changed and been changed by. The Morrisons, and the Kowalskis, and the Calloways, and 24 others. The county that had been half dying in December, and was in June entirely stubbornly beautifully alive. I need to check on the Henderson boy next week, she said. James, his mother thinks he's fully recovered, but she said something in passing last Tuesday that made me want to look at him again. You can take Riley, Nathaniel said. He's fixed the north fence twice this month. He could use something to do. He's not in love with me anymore, Clara said. He's been looking at the Kowalski daughter for 6 weeks. Nathaniel looked at her. You noticed. I notice everything. I'm a nurse. She paused. She likes him too. She just doesn't know he's interested because he hasn't said anything. Should I say something to him? Absolutely not. Let him figure it out. She paused. Although if he hasn't moved by September, I may say something to her. He looked at her. What? She said. Nothing, he said. I just love you. She looked up at him with that clear, direct gaze that still, after 6 months, had the power to make him feel like the most seen person in any room. I know, she said. I love you too. A pause. Now stop being sentimental. We have guests. He kept his arm around her. She let him. And that was the shape of it. Not a grand finale, not a perfect ending from a storybook. Just two people who had found each other at the worst and truest moment of their lives, who had chosen each other with their eyes open and their facts straight, who had built something real from honesty and work, and the willingness to stay when staying cost something. A house full of warmth and people, and the sound of a life being actually lived. A clinic with a south-facing window. A valley that knew it was cared for. A woman who had learned to let herself be loved. A man who had finally learned why love was worth the trouble. The room that had been locked for 20 years was not a monument anymore. It was just where they slept. Where they talked before the fire. Where the window caught the morning light exactly right, and Clara sometimes stood in it without knowing she was doing it. Just stood there in the gold of it, and Nathaniel watched her, and thought, this is what the room was waiting for. This is what I was waiting for the whole time without knowing the name of it. He knew the name of it now, and it had been worth every year of the waiting.